now.
Today, we will tell you about the power of stories, because stories rule the world. They become narratives, and they determine who and what we know about, what and who we care about, what we want to fight for, and what we choose to ignore. They shape who holds the power, how economies are built, and which voices write the rules. That's why it matters who tells them and how they are told. That's why we are here. We are Crux Productions, a non-profit film collective that leverages storytelling for social and environmental change. Today we will tell you about what we do, how we do it, and what's next for us.
While we might respond to the name production company, what we do is actually much, much more than just creating films. We pair stories with action. Because through each of our backgrounds in social impact work, we've come to realize that awareness, while important, it's severely overrated. Because today, people know about the crises our world faces. Governments know about climate change. Companies know about the social injustices that exist. That's why today, the question that matters more is whether these people care, whether these people act. Because that is what our world so desperately needs today, action. This is something that the current media landscape really struggles with today. As we are surrounded by more and more media, each individual piece of content matters a little less. Say you go to the movies, for example. You might see the most touching film ever about the melting ice caps. And for that brief moment at the movie theater, you might actually really care about that issue. But then you leave the theater, you start heading home, and on your way back you're going to start reading other news. News about hunger in Sudan, news about child labor in Bangladesh, whatever it is. And by the time you reach back home, you're likely to continue your life as usual. That is why documentaries alone will not change the world. What they can do is act as the first step for a greater movement. By figuring out who needs to see the films that we create and how, we as a non-profit focus on maximizing impact. So, whether it's by pairing the film we create with a political debate, an art exhibition, a social media campaign, or something completely else, we leverage storytelling to directly inspire and empower action in people across the world.
Okay, so how do we do that? I'm going to talk about our process of making a movie, but first, let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Leah. I've always been a dreamer. I've always been an artist. That usually comes with being told what you can't do a lot. Like when I was 11 and I tried to save all of the turtles by making homemade bracelets and selling them. It turned out I actually couldn't save all of them. But we learned that sometimes the most effective and disruptive things when it comes to shifting narratives starts with a really bold idea. When you think outside of the box. And so to illustrate what I mean, I want to take you on a short journey. Last year, we were living in San Francisco in the Tenderloin. When you Google the Tenderloin, this is what you'll see. It's a struggling neighborhood. There's thousands of people homeless, and every year around 600 people die from drug overdose. I could end this story here, but then you would have a very wrong image of what the Tenderloin is. Because it struggles with this, it's a narrative that is simplified and instrumentalized. Because the Tenderloin is also a community, a great community where there's lots of art and resilience. It's loud and expressive and creative, and we got to see that. But they struggle under that narrative that is told about them. So, what can you do? Host an art exhibition. At least that's what we did. We brought together a few local artists from various backgrounds, some housed, some unhoused, to celebrate their art, celebrate their perspectives, and listen to them. I want to introduce you to Charles Blackwell. Charles Blackwell is a poet and an artist. He is partially blind. He's legally blind and partially deaf. So when he paints, he has to get really, really close to the canvas, and then he creates beautiful scenes of people on stage, and he's capturing the spirit of jazz. He's been through some very hard times. He has spent some time in prison, some time homeless. He's wanted to take his life, but he chose to create, and when he presents a poem, everyone holds their breath. And I've learned a lot about resilience from Charles. Usually, the Tenderloin is avoided, but through that exhibition, we got to bring people from all over San Francisco into the neighborhood to show the documentary that we made about these people, and then have an evening of celebrating art, of starting conversations, of giving these issues complexity and faces and humanity, and while hosting an art exhibition to challenge a stigmatizing narrative might not be the most obvious solution, it surely was a really powerful one.
Each of our projects starts with a bold idea, but ideas alone aren't enough. Hi, I'm Gaia, and I'm a technical lead at Crux. Well, that's true, but it's not really who I am. It's just a small part of me. To really understand who I am, we have to zoom out. Because like all of us, I'm complex, and who I am cannot fit into a single photo. But if you cannot fit even one person into a single frame, imagine what happens when you try to tell a story of a community, nation, or the entire world. Narratives become exponentially complex, yet our society increasingly pretends they are not. That's why at Crux, we make it our personal mission to tell stories that respect complexities, because the story that simplifies distorts. And I learned this most clearly while creating documentaries. For example, this is about a part of South Africa that you will probably see while traveling as a tourist. Well, maybe you will drive past the township feeling a bit of guilt, but soon enough you will be back on your way to the sunny side of Cape Town. And this is also the Cape Town that I experienced at first. But soon enough I realized that that's only one frame of the narrative. I found out that apartheid never truly ended. Yes, the rules changed 30 years ago, but the mindset stayed the same. Before, it was the rules that segregated people. Now it is the money that prevents Black families from accessing education, everyday resources, basic housing, and labor opportunities. So I decided to go beyond the doors of comfort. I went to the townships. I spent time with people there. I listened, I learned, I stayed overnight, I observed what's happening. I stopped filming about the people and started filming with them. Because that's where empathy begins. That's where complexity becomes power. And that's why at Crux, we fight for stories that embrace nuances.
Well, what about after the idea? What about after creating the film? We talk so much about this idea of impact and action, but how does that actually happen? Well, this idea of achieving and fighting for impact that goes beyond mere awareness building has actually guided my life for many years now. My name is Hanna, and my background is in environmental activism and political advocacy, where ranging from United Nations negotiations to national level policymaking, energy sector consultancy, and more, I have relentlessly fought for youth participation and climate justice. And doing this work, I have seen time and time again how politics continuously twist climate change into an agenda or an ideology rather than treating it as the scientific fact, as the undeniable global crisis that it is. So, we wanted to refocus environmental discourse back to what truly matters, the lived human experiences. Because climate change isn't something abstract, it's not like a looming threat of the future. It is a reality today, a reality that impacts billions of people worldwide. And we decided to capture some of those stories. That's why we created our first ever film, Down to Earth, which comprises of the stories of 15 young people from around the world on how they experience the effects of climate change in their local home communities. And that is great and all, but is that it? Well, you might guess by now that that's not all there is to the story, because for us, the film was only a tool rather than an end goal. It was a tool for bridging the voices that matter with where they matter. Because that's what impact is all about. Impact is about connecting the problem with the right solution, connecting the story with the right audience. And with Down to Earth, that right audience was decision makers. So, we hosted a political debate at the European Parliament, where a screening of our film primed a political debate, a roundtable discussion between politicians, organizations, and young climate activists, prompting a very concrete set of policy recommendations for the common way forward. And this is just one example of the many ways how we created a movement around Down to Earth, which has now, today, it's been screened at events and movie festivals around the world. Across all of the projects that we've done and continue doing, we collaborate with incredible organizations to amplify our impact, ranging from grassroots NGOs to intergovernmental institutions, and most recently, the prestigious UN Millennium Fellowship Leadership Program. And through all of this, we are creating projects that are not just descriptive, but disruptive. Projects that boldly demand loud change to the status quo.
Okay, so what's next now? We are working on a really bold project and we need your help for it. Young people are losing hope. When we were doing the film Down to Earth, one message kept repeating, and it is that young people are giving up, not because they're weak, but because they see their worlds collapsing before their eyes. Eco-anxiety is the fear of environmental breakdown. It's feeling hopeless and is something that is very real and very common across our generation. But we refuse to give up because this is the world that we inhabit. We have no choice but to fight. So we're making our very first full-feature documentary called Not Done Yet. And it's a documentary that is by, for, and about a generation, our generation, and it tells a story about climate activism in a way that is supposed to celebrate it, that is supposed to inspire. And we're doing so by bringing together a few of the most visionary leaders in the climate scene right now. Like, for example, Jule Schnarrenberg, who we got to film during summer, where she was bringing climate change to the world's highest court in The Hague. So, no, we're not done yet. We have a vision, and we're expanding. We're bringing in our first intern. We're hosting events in Japan, where we're currently based. We're starting a podcast. So basically, we're building this next chapter of Crux Productions, but we're doing so right now with almost no resources. We have shown that we can do a lot on a shoestring. Imagine what we can do with some real support.